So I just want to first say welcome. My name is Samantha. I'm one of the teen librarians here at the Levittown Public Library. And I want to welcome everyone to our very first Meet the Professionals program. So I just wanted to take a quick second to just introduce our presenter today. Kathy Mavrikakis is the Senior Production Manager for CNBC Digital Video Department. She previously worked for NBC and Worldwide Pants as a supervising producer for Late Night and The Late Show with David Letterman. During her time with The Late Show, she produced segments as various as Paul McCartney in concert on the marquee of the Ed Sullivan Theater and exploding a 3,000-pound pumpkin at Coney Island. So Kathy was also an executive in charge of production for The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. And in 2015, she spent a year working as a line producer at The View on ABC. So I really thank you for coming today, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can tell us all about, your amazing career. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I do appreciate it. I think to myself back to when I was in high school, and I was interested in doing something sort of in the arts, and I thought about photography, and I imagined the famous photographers that I knew and realized there weren't very many of them. And then I thought about the thing that I saw in my house all the time, television. And I thought, well, why don't I try to find my college career, make my college career about television? I really didn't even understand the roles of producers or directors or anything like that at that time. But I thought, why don't we see if I can find some career within that field. And New York, even though it is smaller than LA, did have some production. It was mainly news, but it did have some production. So I was looking at all the New Jersey state schools, because I'm from New Jersey. And I did look at a couple of fancier schools like Syracuse, but they have excellent television programs, but they are so many hours from New York. I went to Montclair State, which was a small, very small program at that time, but it was only 14 miles from New York City. So I was able to be in class during the day and then go into the city and sometimes have a class in the city at 60 minutes. Like I took a class at 60 minutes and I was able to go every single Tuesday night easily into the city. And if I was at a school that was far, far away, I wouldn't have that opportunity. So I think it was a great decision for me, and it's something to keep in mind when you're choosing a college as well. Don't only choose by their program. You want to make sure they have something that's strong in what your area of interest, but also make sure that it makes sense to where you want to be. If you want to be in film, maybe you want to actually look at colleges in California. So I went to Montclair State, and within Montclair State, we did a lot of news. I was on the board for making the news show once a week, and I worked on the football games. But when it came to looking for an internship in my senior year, I went to NBC and I asked for a news internship. And the woman there said, I think you would be better suited for late night with David Letterman. They have a lot of interns, and they really have active roles. So it's not just photocopying, although there was a lot of photocopying. I was able to do a lot of roles within production. I distributed scripts. I got to meet every single person on the team, and that gave me kind of a good overview of what a comedy variety show would look like, what the executive producer's role was, what the people in the control room did. So after my internship, which was in production, I left. I worked in an advertising agency for 3 months. I really hated it. It wasn't something that's for me, but it is a good career for people who love to be in advertising. The reception job at Letterman opened up. I went and interviewed and got that job, and I became the receptionist. 3 months later, I became the assistant to the associate producer. And then what I did from there was really just start to take on jobs that other people didn't want. So if the associate producer was too busy to pick the repeats, I started picking the repeats. If she needed someone to distribute all the memos, I distributed them because I wanted to know every single person that was getting one of these notification of what our schedule was, I wanted to know what their roles at NBC were, right? I wanted to know who the program practices person was, who the person in sales was, who's the person in programming. I wanted to know because then when you want to network later, you have all these, I had all these contacts. So then after that, I became the associate producer because I had taken so much of her job, she became the producer. And over time, I did more and more, and I started to become very varied and wear lots of hats. I became the line producer at one point and then the supervising producer. And as the line producer, it's different than a news producer. I basically was following the line of the budget and managing what we did. So I would read a script, I would open it up, and I would look, what does the script say? It says, you know, Bill Murray is going to pretend to jump off the roof, and we're going to do it tomorrow at 4 o'clock during the show live. Okay. What does it mean? I have to close the street. What does it mean? I need a stuntman. Bill Murray's not going to jump off the roof. I need matching wardrobe because the stuntman has to be a match to Bill. What does it mean? Is there going to be any other production involved? Certainly we need police on the street. We need to have an ambulance standing by. Do I need to have the fire department there? Is there some kind of explosives that are going to be used? No. So I would read a script and then I would talk to the executive producers and say, okay, we can do this. I only have to add 2 stagehands and I have to add this and I have to add that. Or I would say, this is too expensive. Can we do a different idea? Can we do it a slightly different way? Because this is not within our budget for this week. Can we be more creative about what you want to do? Not just with Bill Murray, but with any stunt or anything we wanted to do. I would read the script and I would say, look, we don't have any of this wardrobe in-house. If we were to change it slightly and make it be everyone in baseball uniforms, we have those. So let's just change the sketch and make it be baseball players because we have those here and no one has to go out and get them and we don't have to pay for them. So I really watched the financial end of it. Eventually, I also managed I consulted on the budget for the Late Late Show in California as well with Craig Ferguson. And I had the difficult job sometimes of telling them no. They would say, well, we really want to do this and we want to hire someone here and do that. And I would have to say, I'm sorry, but it's not in your budget. You want to get rid of something to add that, you can do that. So my role kind of became, in addition to production, I also became sort of corporate. And I had to represent the corporation. Some of the other things that I did when I was a supervising producer and through the years was I dealt with program practices. Program practices or standards was the network representation saying you can say this on TV, you can't say this on TV, you can show this on TV, you can't show this on TV. Sometimes an artist would come on, a musical artist would come on, and there would be vulgarity in the song, and I would have to go to CBS and say, well, this is artistic license, can we put it on? Can we take an L for language? Or no, it was too vulgar, and I would go to the artist and say, you know, I would say to the representation, is there a radio version of this? And then usually the artist had a memorized radio version and pretty much always did that. So I did a lot of that, discussing words, discussing those kinds of things. What can you do on TV? It was network television, but it was outside the family hours. So we got a little bit of leeway. I dealt with security. There was a lot of security involved in that show because there are people who have mental illness and thought that David Letterman was talking to them through their TV sets, and they would show up. Some would be in love with him and some would want to hurt him. So we had a lot of security. We had a lot of security also when we dealt with important guests, like we had Barack Obama when he was a sitting president on the show. And honestly, dealing with the Secret Service is something I did many, many times, but that experience was probably one of the hardest experiences I ever had because I really thought we weren't going to start the show on time because the metal detectors, the situation really got right down to like a few minutes before we went on the air, before all the audience was in their seats. But and we made it. I also had to deal with the fire department. So if we wanted to blow up something, for a while we were allowed to blow things up on the street, and after that we had to blow them up at other locations like Coney Island or in Queens. But we always need to have the fire department. The fire department has a special division of explosives, and they work on film sets and they work for television shows, and the city sends them to make sure that everything is done safely. So I would, of course, like work with them too. Sometimes when I would do a big project, like we had a person walk across Broadway on a wire. Philippe Petit walked from one building to our building, 14 flights in the air. That took me months and months to produce because we had to get the other building to agree to let us link to their building to anchor the wire. And he had to start there and get dressed there and get on the wire and then come across. We had to negotiate with the city to allow it, and the city made us put down big airbags. And as we agreed and walked out of the meeting, Philippe Petit, who's French, said, "Let them have their airbags. If I were to fall, I wouldn't land at it. I would be dead." So, we did what we had to do, and he was perfectly fine. It rained that day. He still went on the wire, and it was the scariest moment of my professional life, but he made it, and it was perfectly fine. So those are the kinds of things I produced. And up until the last days in 2015, I was very active in all the decisions we made for what we did on air. After that, I went and worked at The View for 1 year, and the cast was wonderful. Whoopi Goldberg was great. Joy Behar was great. But in that instance, the executive producer, one of the executive producers, and I, it wasn't like we never argued. We just didn't see a use for each other. I didn't like her style of management, and she did not want me as part of the show. So after a year, she basically fired me. And the truth of the matter is, one of the best experiences in my life is having been fired, because the feeling that I felt, I will always remember, but coming back from that and then getting another job at CNBC Digital and then working my way back up to feeling my own value again was super important. And actually I wouldn't do it any other way. If I had to do it again, I would still figure out a way to let her fire me, because I feel like that experience is something that's essentially me now. And I know the things that I may have done better to please her, but I wouldn't have done it because she and I just didn't see eye to eye. And that brings me to CNBC Digital. So now I work for digital. So I kind of am sideways to TV. We see TV happening because CNBC has live TV all day. We call it the day part. And then they have programming at night. But the teams that I manage, we have small cameras and we go out and we shoot different kinds of content. One team literally just shoots content that they think is interesting for millennials and Gen Z. Another team is shooting a video that they think would be good on the CNBC Pro app. And another team is shooting tech. They do a lot of Tesla, they do Google and Alphabet, and they do iPhone, all that kind of stuff. So I basically had to go from TV where everything was a union and I couldn't touch a camera. I had to say, let's hire a camera person. Let's hire someone to do the lighting. Let's hire this. And now I'm in digital and I'm carrying lights and setting them up. I'm learning how to run the audio myself. And I had to learn pretty much my whole career. All my skills had to be upgraded from what I used in college many years before to what we use now as standard in digital. So there are no unions. Everyone does everything. And I have to say, I think the skills that the people that work on my teams have are amazing because they do everything. They pitch the guests, They write the scripts, they shoot the interviews and the B-roll, and then they edit it and make a whole work of art. And sometimes they write the article that goes with it too. So that's my path, and that's where I am now. And now I'm working from home, trying to keep track of the equipment that I've brought to my basement. I send it out, I bring it back, I send it out, I bring it back. Any questions? I think that when we first left the offices in March, and April and May, we were all consumed, of course, with the reality of what COVID is. And our content did feature a lot of information about it. And as journalists, I think that's essential, right? We're answering questions, we're asking questions of people that you would want to ask. We want to be giving the information that you want about all kinds of things. But then we realized there was kind of overkill. Everyone was doing that. So Business Insider was doing it, and Forbes was doing it, and the New York Times was doing it. Everybody was doing similar content. And we started to back off a little bit on that. We still do, on the Make It team, we will do COVID-related stories about people and how it has affected them. Like we did a story on college seniors who were graduating and had been promised jobs, and then the jobs were rescinded because it was about people. And we want to do stories about people. But we're not doing that many. We're not really doing a lot of stories that you see on the traditional news that kind of give you the head count every night about how many people have been infected and what the percentage is. So we backed off. So yes, we went toward it, and now we've backed off. I definitely was many, many times in the afternoons when I would go down to the control room. I was the only woman in the control room, and I was surrounded by men. And I've experienced some of what you're saying. But I wouldn't, so when I worked with our security team, they definitely always tried to they loved me and they treated me nicely, but they always wanted to be in charge. You know, they're all former New York City police, and they were not used to taking second fiddle. And one time we were having the president on, and Secret Service was there, and I was running the meeting. And the security person who was assigned to be there at that meeting, he stormed off. He was furious. He didn't want to, I had to literally go and apologize to him because I was running the meeting and I took over the conversation about security. But what I would say is that the environment that I'm working in now, which is mainly people from, let's say, 25, maybe 25 to sometimes early 40s, that really does not exist. In Make It, it's almost all women running the whole newsroom, and more women on the video team than men. Actually, I've noticed that my coworker, who's a senior producer, Nate, anytime we hire a guy, he's like becomes overjoyed that there's another guy in the newsroom. But the team in New Jersey is not like that either. They never say, oh, here, I'll lift it because I'm a man, or I should do that because I'm a man. Everybody does everything. It's pretty fair in digital. I think real headroads have been made in the last 5 years. I think that right now things are changing with the internships, and certainly they're changing with all the shows. I can guarantee it at NBC. So for many, many years, those internships, or a lot of them, were by people who knew somebody who recommended somebody, right? So when we would hire interns and say we would have 10 interns in the summer, 5 were people who were somewhat connected to us through, so-and-so's chauffeur's daughter. We have to interview that person. And then maybe 5 were people that were resumes that got to us that we thought were exceptional people. But we could have had 500 resumes and we hired 10 people. So it is really hard to shine and get your resume out. The number one thing I think people have to do is have to try to make contacts in any way. So if you know someone who knows somebody, you try to get them to put a word in for you. You use LinkedIn. You go on LinkedIn and you find and you search the executive producers and the so producers of different things that you want to do, and then you message them and you let them know that you're looking for an internship and you want to know where to file. You're not saying, and then that will force that person to kind of push your resume on. Oh, I'm getting an internet is unstable message. We'll send your resume on to the right people. There are, so many careers in media, and there's so much more to do in media than just television. Obviously, there's film and there's radio, but there's also podcasts now. So there's so many podcasts, and there's now the podcast producing has really started to come under the auspices of several big corporations have now started to just buy up all the successful podcasts. So Spotify has a really big, iHeartRadio has a big podcast group. So that's a really good place to look too. If you take any kind of classes in audio production, you could go into podcasting. There's always producers that are needed for podcasting. And even in a journalistic sense, if you listen to the New York Times' Daily and you listen to the list of producers at the end of that show, there's so many people who are writing and producing that show because they have a daily show. It's a lot of work. And of course, radio, there is traditional radio. It still exists. NPR exists and CBS exists. So those jobs are out there. There's jobs in the recording industry. There's still people who sell albums and promote albums, not albums. So I don't know if they're CDs now or whether we've gone back to vinyl, but those jobs are much less than they used to be, but they still exist. And those are good careers. Of course, advertising, which wasn't for me, but advertising is a good place to work as well. And then within those careers, all of them have smaller things, right? So just from what I experienced in television, there's talent management. So every single celebrity who came, the bands, the celebrities, they're all managed by somebody. They have agents and they have managers and they have business managers. That's a huge business. And a lot of people go into that. There's sales departments within television. And honestly, the sales departments are treated like they're the most important thing, because if the network weren't making money, there would be no programming, because you have to have the ads to pay for the shows. So the sales department is a good way to get in the door too. Also, there's direct to consumer now and video on demand, and those teams are kind of similar to sales, but they specifically will work with one brand and get them to promote their stuff within a video on demand or within direct to consumer programming. Like Peacock is a streaming service. The streaming services are all direct to consumer. And that's really big right now too. So that's a good place to try to look for work as well. Every single network has several legal departments, because not only do you have legal issues, like, okay, we were shooting here and a car came along and hit the rental car that we were using. So now we need to use our lawyers because the person's suing us. Okay. So you have that kind of legal. You have legal standards, like what can you do on TV? What can't you do on TV? You have just risk as well. So if you are in insurance and you do risk management, that's a career within media as well, because you have to know whether or not you're going to be insured if you want to do something that's a little bit risky on a film shoot or on a television shoot. Now every single team, even in digital, has a social team. The social team is essential to selling your product and getting it out there and getting people talking about it. So the social team on any one of those places, any one of those careers, I would think every single career has a social team now. And then there's also music, photo and video clearances, all of that is done by the legal team as well. You can't work on a TV show and then go and steal music from somebody else. You have to license it. So you have a career, like I did a lot of licensing over the years. Sometimes someone would come to me and say, we're making a film and we want a clip of David Letterman because we want everyone to know that it's midnight, right? It's in the middle of the night. And so by hearing David's voice, they're going to know. So I would license the clip to them and then charge them money for our production company. Other times I would want a license from another company to use on our show. So that's a career that people don't know about very much as well. Try to think if I have other notes. And for people who are going to be picking their college careers now, when you're talking to the colleges and you're looking at the kinds of content that they're creating and the kind of majors they have, a lot of people just want to do TV radio. Well, that's very traditional. Many schools have something called emerging media, which means even we don't know what's going to emerge while you're here for 4 years. It may be TikTok. See, TikTok happened. So we want to be there, whatever that next thing is, we want to be there for it. So emerging media is a great, great major to consider. If you want to be in media, you can do all those other things, television, radio, and do emerging media. And I don't know what else. Any other questions? My experience now is more with young associate producers coming out of college or coming from another location. I would say their salaries probably range maybe $60,000, a little bit above, a little bit below. It depends on how much experience they have. But I think $50,000 to $60,000, probably $60,000 is probably where an entry level kind of position goes. And then producers go up to 75. Well, and if they have a lot of experience, they can be over 100.
I also had one quick question too. For looking at teens that are in high school right now and are just considering maybe something that this might be something that they want to look into. Is there anything that you can suggest that they can be doing now, even before college was happened, to either explore or to brush up on some skills that may eventually help them in that career field?
That's a great question, and yes, every single person has a phone in their hand that can shoot video now. You can adjust your phone to shoot 4K video if you want to. And then you can put it on your computer and you can edit it. If you really, really want to be prepared for one of these majors, I would say maybe figure out a way to invest in Adobe Creative Cloud, at least Premiere and Photoshop, and start simple. Start something simple. Shoot something around the house, maybe tell a very basic story or have your mother do a recipe. And then you sit down and put it in the right order and use it, and then you add music, and then you have to lower the music when she's talking and raise the music when she's not talking. And you have to say, oh, that's the jump cut. I did something wrong here. It's out of focus. I have to cover that. Oh, let's use a shot of something else. It gets you thinking about how to tell a story, right? You can go and interview your neighbors and talk to them about something that you care about. Obviously, actually, almost every charity could probably use you to shoot a video for them that they can put on their website. So you could go to Mary Brennan Inn and figure out a way to work with some of the people there and shoot a video for them that they can put on their website so that they can get more donations. There's lots of great things that you can do, but I would say be as hands-on as you possibly can. As a follow-up to the question about salaries, I always warn people, young people, when they're going to figure out how much they want to invest in college, that they actually figure out the salary on the back end and figure out whether or not their debt that they're going to incur is reasonable, bearing in mind that salary. Like, you know, if you're going to become a lawyer and you have high hopes of having a high salary, then you can incur more debt. But if you're, as my daughter is a social worker, you really can't anticipate a huge salary on the other side. So in television, there are jobs that can get you, you know, to $50,000 or $60,000 pretty quickly, but keep in mind how much debt you may incur while you're going to do that. Pick the right college. That's my advice. Pick the right college. I also have a little bit of advice that I usually tell the interns. When I used to speak to the interns as a group, I would warn them that every experience that you have in an office is valuable. So working for a TV show and you have a certain amount of interns, not percentage-wise, not every single person's going to enjoy working in that environment. But what you learn when you do an internship is, what you're really learning is not about how to photocopy or run an errand. What you're learning about is yourself. You're learning about what you're good at. You're learning about what you don't enjoy and what you may be bad at. And you want to avoid those things, right? So what your internship tells you is, I'm good at working with people. I'm good at working by myself, actually. I'm good. I really, really love working with talent. I want to try to figure out if I want to work with talent. I'm really good at writing. So I really should write scripts, and maybe I'm interested in doing documentaries. Oh no, I want to be a comedy writer. So when you're in a position of doing an internship, you have to use that to sift through everything to find out more about yourself. And that pushes you along your career, right? So you figure out what you're good at, you figure out what you enjoy, and it sends you in the right direction, and it pushes you away from the things that you really didn't enjoy. And all along life, you're like putting pegs in the right holes and following along, and that's really what life is, finding the right path for yourself. So pay attention to everything. Even the negative experiences are important. I had a job where I literally laughed at work all the time. Was it stressful? Was it hard? Did we sometimes go crazy? Yes. But I really, really enjoyed my job, and it was so much fun, and I really was happy. Certainly an extrovert has an advantage over other people when it comes to being on a comedy TV show, for sure. But if you're in a newsroom and you're an excellent writer and you're good in doing phone call interviews, and you can really get to the basic issue of the story that you're reporting, I think there's plenty of reporters who are introverts, and I think that there's a lot of room for both kinds of people. But yes, in entertainment, more people are extroverts than are introverts, for sure. What I will say too is, when I used to hire interns, I would make sure I would ask them this question. I would say, in a group of people working on a class project, who are you in that group? And a lot of them write about, I'm the leader. I'm the one that turns everything in. I'm the leader. Some people would say, I'm always in the group. I never don't show up, but I'm not always the leader. You have to also understand that when you're building a staff, you can't have all leaders. You have to have people who are the workers too. So, so that puts together people who are not necessarily the loudest person in the room. They're just people you can rely on, and they're smart, and they're good, and they're great researchers, you know. Career, what your first exposure is that you really like, you wind up going in that direction. So, you know, I really, really thought I wanted to be a director, but I was super impressed with the women that I worked with, who were the producers, and they took to me and I took to them. And so they were my role models, and I wanted to be a person who, and I was really good at looking at all the pieces. A producer really looks at all the pieces and tries to figure out, can we afford it? Can we get it? How do we get it? How do we get it here on time? Can we make this whole thing happen? And then the director is the person who's sitting there is, you got to get it. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And the producer's like, I'm doing my best. You know, I'm doing my best. We're going to get everything you want, but I'm going to try to get it here at the right time. But sometimes the producer's standing out on the street talking to the director on the phone and saying, yes, the wood chipper's still on a bridge. It's not going to be here in time for tonight's show. What can you do? You know, disappointments happen.
Just wanted to say again to thank you to Kathy for this amazing program. I definitely learned a lot. I've also always been interested on, you know, exactly what happens to make a TV show happen. So I just want to say thank you again for sharing your experiences and your path and your insights. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.